Welcome to the Dev Launch Podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories of the tech industry's rising stars, corporate America employees turned tech entrepreneurs. Hear how these folks took a risk in leaving their W-2 job to build their enterprise, the lessons they've learned along the way, and what they're doing to revolutionize this industry, one project at a time. Our guest today is Zack Steven, the CEO of Cloudburst SBC and a partner at Monkey Island Ventures. Located here with me in the Twin Cities, Cloudburst helps non-technical founders build tech companies that succeed. With deep entrepreneurial experience and a product-led approach, they're committed to helping founders solve meaningful problems through tech. Zack, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tony. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Well, Zack and I met through a mutual connection here in the Twin Cities. And when this mutual connection of ours, a friend of ours, mentioned that she's working with a local dev agency, I was like, I have got to meet these guys. And even, anybody who has a chance to meet Zack and have even just a short conversation with him will tell you it's one of the more enlightening experiences. And I'm like, I knew I had to have him on my show. So if for nothing else, because of the rich history as a successful serial entrepreneur. So lots for you all who are listening to learn from this man today. And I'm super excited to go ahead and start barraging you with some questions, if you don't mind.
I'm up for it. Sounds great.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so like I mentioned, Zack, you are a serial entrepreneur by all accounts. Can you bring us back to the beginning, even before you launched that first business? Can you talk to us a little bit about your days as an employee and ultimately what led to that eventual launch for your first business? What was the turning point?
Yeah, it even goes kind of back before being an employee, even back in high school. And kind of my first experience as an entrepreneur, I did have the benefit of growing up in an entrepreneurial family. I think that makes a huge difference, whether it's your direct family or someone that that you've been able to see or experience someone living the entrepreneurial life or had a chance to work in an entrepreneurial business. So for me, that was the cabinet shop that was started by my grandfather, where I would go and sweep the floors and enter time data into spreadsheets for the weekly timesheets and things. But when I was in high school at St. Paul Central here in the Twin Cities, I had an opportunity where they would allow you to bring snacks into certain classes as long as you kept it in there and you didn't take it out in the hallways. And I was bringing in some New York seltzers for myself to drink. And one day someone asked me, hey, can I buy one of those? And I was like, sure, you can buy one of those. And then the next day somebody else was asking to buy them. And I was like, I can only bring so many New York seltzers. But somebody else asked me, do you have a pack of gum? I'm like, well, no, but I can get one. And so kind of that was really my first entrepreneurial experience was, responding to demand, which I think is a good lesson in general, is just people are asking for what you have. And you say, somebody will buy gum for me if I can get gum. And so by the end of the next few weeks, I ended up with a duffel bag and I got the reputation as the candy man in high school. And it was a great job because I could do it during school and the cash flows were good as long as the heat wasn't too much for the day, until I got, shut down by the administration. And they said, no, really, that's for kids in French and band. They asked me, what are you raising money for? And I just said, for myself. And that was, that was the end of that. But it was kind of the beginning of that experience of delivering something of value to people that they're willing to pay for as my entrepreneurial experience. But then from there, through college, my first job out of college, I graduated with an art degree. Always kind of been a creative person that likes problem solving, but doing it in ways that are relatable to people, trying to build things that are beautiful and useful. My first job after college was in the family cabinet business again, because I kind of thought, there's an opportunity. But that was as an employee, albeit, in the family business as an employee. And I worked for other people for quite a while. And so I learned a lot, which is certainly something I would recommend to folks is, there's a lot of emphasis to just get started, just jump in, learn as you go. And there's a lot of truth to that, but there's also a lot that you can learn less hard ways by being a part of an entrepreneurial company, learning from entrepreneurial leaders, understanding how business works before you jump in yourself. So I worked in the cabinet business I ended up patenting a product of my own that then I left the cabinet business. That was kind of my first real life adult entrepreneurial adventure, was this product called Zackaroo's elastic shoe fasteners that I had a patent for. Invented this when I was in high school, got the patent in college, and decided I think this could be my $1 million idea. And so I quit my job, kind of went all in on that business. We can certainly talk more about that experience, but that's a pretty formative thing for me, of like
Mm,
going into business full time too soon. It wasn't a full time job yet.
mm,
And so I wanted to live out that dream. I thought that's what you're supposed to do, is like, if you believe in it, you just go all in. And there's truth to that. But at the same point, it really raises the stakes, at least well, for a guy at that time that had just gotten married and has a mortgage and,
ooh,
starting out that way.
yeah.
So had definitely success with that business to a level, learned a lot of things, but then kind of went back into working for other people again. So those were kind of my first initial experiences, but I always kind of had that spark, like, okay, what did I learn last time?
Hmm.
I got to take a break from it now, figure out what's going to be my next adventure. And in the meantime, learn more about business. So I went to working in private equity and for holding companies, and just kind of, that's what's led to some of Monkey Island Ventures and how to be involved in, broader operations than just a single venture.
Hmm.
So, um,
That's
looking back, there seems to be some connections between the meandering path, but sometimes you're like, why did it take that
But
long?
like when you're in the middle of it, it's so hard to be able to see how those dots connect. But like you said, you look back on it, you can be like, oh yeah, no, that made a lot of sense. I think something that you had said that's worth just emphasizing, and I loved how you framed it, is, you know, yes, there is merit to going out and just doing the thing, just get experience, like learn it by doing it. And I think that that's probably what most of the procrastinators and the people who want to get everything perfect need to hear. They just need to get out there and do it. But I liked what you said, because it's a slight difference, or a slight change to what I say, which is I like corporate America for learning. I like to learn on other people's dimes. But you took it a step further and you said trying to work for entrepreneurial companies, which I think is a really helpful distinction, right? Because like there's a difference between working for a startup-y type of company, one that is very entrepreneurial, culturally speaking, and one that is very status quo, very much like a very well-established market, a very well-established business. They're two very different experiences. And it sounds like you had a great opportunity to work in a more entrepreneurial environment as an employee. Is that right?
Yeah, I think the entrepreneurial environment gives you opportunities to kind of grow into stuff that needs to be done. Whereas a larger company has more specialization. It has no, that's not your job. There's enough of just this thing for you to just do that thing and get great at it and go deep and okay. But I'm more of a, I like to learn about how things work, and kind of tying back to my art background, I got interested in how should a business be designed? What are
Hmm.
the skills and tools that I could bring to, if I want to create a great company, what do I need to know? And it's a lot of practice and learning and application.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think you're right. And I would even clarify that it's different working for a startup versus, a small business versus a growth company. So I would
Ooh.
say, if you have an opportunity to work in a company that's growing, that's really exciting. Because a lot of smaller businesses, it's like, hey, we've had the same 15 people for the last 30 years, and nothing wrong with that. It's probably working out just fine for the owner. But in terms of the employee experience, on the flip side, if you're a startup, that's not kind of really real business. It has different economics, it's got different
Hmm.
motivations, and you can learn a lot there. But it just kind of depends on what kind of company are you thinking you might want to start.
Yep.
Because startup folks sometimes just are disconnected from the economic realities of
Hmm.
business, and big corporate folks, I would say, are disconnected from the grind of
Oh my
entrepreneurship
gosh.
and the risk taking and the multiple hats.
I
So,
I will be the first to admit
yeah.
I was very like prior to launching into, not only working in my own business but also like working with other businesses at this scale. I was very disconnected in corporate America, because like you've got a lot of cash that you're sitting on in those large companies. You had said something, I think I know what the answer is to this, but I'd love for you to expand on it. You said that the startups are largely disconnected from the economic realities. Can you go further into what you mean by that?
Yeah, and that's been interesting, kind of coming from an entrepreneurial background and then having my own startup and kind of being in the startup ecosystem, where a lot of it is about pitching a vision for something that you're not sure how you're going to monetize, or we're trying to change the world and we're just trying to raise money for some future valuation. People can put a lot of energy into pitching investors and crafting that narrative and what might happen in the future that can distract them from a focus on the customer or finding less scalable ways to solve the problem for somebody to help identify that there's a business opportunity here. And then technology is more the accelerator than the differentiator. And so we've even had some clients, as we work quite a bit with small to medium-sized business entrepreneurs who have an established business, but they want to grow their business or differentiate themselves or create value in their enterprise through software. So not all of the secret sauce lives in somebody's head. But they'll come in and they get into the kind of this startup world and they're like, what are these people talking about? Pitch decks and investors and this and that. Is like, I just want to get my software working, and they understand how business works in a different way. So, all people with vision, working hard and taking risks, but it's a little bit of a different model and a bit of a different approach. Depending on which kind of business you're in, I would say.
That's super interesting. And, more for us to talk about in a little bit here too, because we're going to get into, the variety of businesses, not only that you have been in, but that you currently have, a vested interest in. So you got the experience to be able to speak well to these topics, like the difference between a startup company and a growth company and a, well-established company. So I loved that differentiation. So, Monkey Island, that was your first major venture. And then 9 years later, there was Water Meter Solutions. And then a year after that, there was Agurian and Fluid Labs. And then 2 years after this, you launched Cloudburst. Would you mind talking us through what went into that rapid succession? And I say rapid succession because, like, in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, a year and another year and then 2 years, like, I'm like, bam, bam, bam. That's lots of stuff coming up. Did you see these as separate and distinct offerings, or did you see each of these offerings as naturally giving way to the work that you're ultimately now doing with Cloudburst?
Yeah, that's a great question. So just to catch people up on the story, really, I am still a non-technical founder. My experience was in entrepreneurship of my own business, the family business, working in a publishing company when I needed to have a job. I even sold cars for a while. Like, at a certain point, you just feel glad to be able to, do things to earn money to pay pay for your family. But I learned a lot about sales on the car dealership. But Monkey Island came out of this vision for a software product, which is the first time, of course, I was using software by then. This was back 2008 or so. So just kind of as the iPhone and Facebook were coming out. But I just thought, wouldn't it be great to have a way to hire trusted people for home services? Classic thing a problem that a lot of people have tried to solve, but kind of came out of my personal conviction that one of the best things I could do was to spend my career and my life trying to build community, strengthen relationships between people. And that commerce was historically like a natural way for people to connect. It's great. Yeah, maybe Tony seems like a nice guy and we should get together sometime. But if I need, CFO services or accounting, like, that relationship can get built through that direct need, as opposed to, wouldn't it be nice? So like, building community through commerce by the change, thought this was my next $1 million idea, but it was software. And then got together in business with my childhood friends, Josh Becerra and Colin Herdman, who are my partners in Monkey Island. And we named the company Monkey Island after the park where we played when we grew up in St. Anthony Park, St. Paul.
No way. That's funny.
Yeah. So our product name was called By the Change, but we decided to call the company Monkey Island, just kind of in the spirit of what we valued and where we came from. And those first 9 years or so were the classic startup, trying to find product market fit, figuring out the revenue, taking a break and working a different job, raising some money, still trying, not letting go of this idea. But eventually we just got to the point where, it's not just about timing. I don't know what it is. We just can't get this multi-sided marketplace vision to work. We need to do something else. And so that's where we had seen other opportunities as we were marketing to small businesses. Hey, advertise on Buy the Change, connect to your communities and support causes you care about. They were like, yeah, hey, but what about Google Ads? What about SEO? And so we were like, again, like the candy thing, like listening. Okay, this is what we're trying to sell. This is what people actually want. And so those are kind of the roots, is what has become Agurian, which is a digital marketing company that I'm still a partner in and is active. We share office space in Northeast Minneapolis with Cloudburst. And so Agurian was kind of the first time where we realized, again, neither Josh nor Colin or I had a direct digital marketing experience, but that was a key part of this business. And so we wanted to bring in different partners into that business, but not into the other things that we were involved with. And so that's where we started creating a separate company. And similarly, with fluid and with water meter solutions, we needed a different level of software expertise or hardware development that was not the same as the digital marketing. And so we just kind of got to a point where we thought it made sense to have separate concerns. Some we were raising funding for, some we had different partners in. One was Delaware C Corp, some was Minnesota LLC. And so that's kind of what was behind it. But we did get to a point where it's just like, we're starting too many things too quickly, like more paperwork, more taxes to pay, more things to pay attention to. And so I haven't really started a new actual entity. Yeah, probably in 5 or 6 years now. We're just kind of like, oh, okay. We can, taper that back a bit.
Yeah.
So I guess I would say that kind of the insight that came from that was, what's the right team for this opportunity? And how do we bring people in with skin in the game? And if it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and everybody's involved in everything, we haven't found that to be the best approach. So that's kind of where we ended up with different companies.
Yeah. So it's kind of where they popped up. It's not because it was just like, oh, here's this shiny thing. Here's this. It's like, no, this is just like bubbling over. And it was a way of channeling the opportunity into a better structure.
Right. Yep. Just for those reasons of having clarity. And then also, we've always been interested, we were founded kind of in this space of launching our own product ideas. And we had done some of those things with software. And so, we pursued a model that I think a lot of other founders follow, is if you have a business, in our case, it was professional services with digital marketing that's generating a certain level of revenue, and you can afford to reinvest some of that into other things. That's kind of what we did, is we launched the services, which created cash flows that we could invest to work on products. And then to speak to Cloudburst, which is really where my core passion was, trying to create the company that I wished I would have found back in 2008 as a non-technical founder, for all the things that I learned about different ways to hire people, learning about product management and software development and risks. Just felt like there weren't a lot of, speaking to your audience, a lot of the development agencies aren't founded by non-developers. It seems, it makes a lot of sense that you would be a talented developer and be able to sell your own skills. Right. I was approaching it more from, I've worked with a lot of folks. I've met a couple of great people. Let's do this in business together and sell these services. I can speak to the business side. They can speak to the technical side, and we can build things together. And that's really kind of what energizes me, is helping people build new things, try new ideas. So that's why we decided to spin out Cloudburst. And it's not to diminish website development. That's an expertise of its own. But we decided to keep Augurian focused on digital marketing and have Cloudburst focused on custom software development. And they serve slightly different markets in terms of the more entrepreneurial small business owner on the Cloudburst side. And Augurian is really more enterprise level, CMO level, digital marketing at a different kind of scale.
Yeah. Well, and man, there were a number of nuggets I do want to try to pull out here, but I think one thing was very evident as you were sharing this is, you spent 9 years making Monkey Island a thing. Like, you guys were going back, you were iterating, really trying to hone in on the product market fit, like you said. And then you got to a point, I loved what you said, you got to a point where so many people were coming to you, and while you were trying to offer them a solution that was native to Monkey Island, everybody was asking about this thing over here. And at some point, as an entrepreneur, you have to listen. You have to say, I'm not going to fight uphill the whole way. I'm going to work with these people who want this thing. Like, back to your candy bar example, like, if they want it, like, sure, I'll sell that. And then that was the thing that ultimately bubbled up into, I'm assuming, is what prompted Augurian to start. Is that right?
Right. Yeah, I think that's very true. And a part of it is that we raised some money from friends and family in Monkey Island for this Buy the Change vision. I just did not want to give up like that. And so one of the reasons that we focus a lot at Cloudburst with bootstrapped and self-funded founders is I understand the pros and cons of taking investment, and it is really great to have support from people and to have that level of privilege, even that there are folks in your network that can fund you, but it also changes the stakes in a way. So we certainly support it. I've been through it. We've done a lot of different types of funding, but where we can, I try to encourage people to get as far as they can with what they have to prove out the concept as much as they can. Um,
And that's
because it really, really sucks to let people down, least of all your closest friends and family.
right. And I got to imagine that's even more so the case in the tech space when people have an idea for a
Yeah.
tech tool, especially for a non-technical founder. Like that's got to be even more the case.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I mean, it's a great business when you can get it working, but with the service business, you can start selling your time for X amount of dollars per hour. With the service business, you got to invest a lot, of varying degrees, but you got to invest quite a bit in order to have something that people can even use. And then you're like, great, they're paying me $19.99 a month. How many of those do I need to equate to what I could earn in 1 hour of my consulting time?
That's right.
So yes, specifically challenging with software. The other challenge there is that the software's not really probably valuable to anybody else if you don't make it work.
That's
right. Like, hey, I bought your coffee shop and your machine and your tables, and if it doesn't work out, we can sell those at a discount to someone else. With software, it's like
very specific.
I don't need that. I'm going to build my own. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly the case. So this is a theme that I continue to pull up in all of my podcast episodes because I love this question that I received from a listener. And he said, Tony, all the podcasts out there who are interviewing these entrepreneurs, they're great and all, but a lot of it's kind of fluffy stuff where they're just like, oh, just like wake up early and take ice baths and, you know, all the fluffy stuff. He's like, I want the hard numbers. I want the facts. He didn't say it exactly like that, but I'm embellishing. Anyway, but as we're talking about this venture, you know, Monkey Island, you know, 9 years before eventually giving way to, we've now launched all these separate entities. And you, oh, by the way, also have this venture kind of studio, essentially. Can you talk to us about once that 9-year period kind of came to a close, where were you sitting revenues wise, if you don't mind my asking?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and you know, it's probably if I had to guess, that'd be in the 500,000 a year to $1 million range or something, you know, at that point. And just for transparency, like when I started this Zackaroo's business off of my patented idea, I funded that by using fixed rate low credit cards to the tune of about $80,000. It was a mistake. That took me a lot of more years of working, you know, I mean, I could rationalize it. Just like, great, like this is 2.9% fixed. And so as long as I make sure my check gets in the mail every month, we're fine. But it's nerve wracking. And it was too much. It was not a good, you know, as much as I'm a numbers guy, it's just like the things you're willing to rationalize in pursuit of this vision. So definitely don't start by digging yourself in a hole. That would be one piece of advice. I mean, you got to take some risk, but it's finding those parameters. And then when we started Monkey Island, Josh and Colin and I had some funds that we contributed, and we signed up for a bank loan personally guaranteed from the bank. And then we raised some money from friends and family. And then during that 9-year period, both Josh and I went and got other jobs for periods of time. So we could basically say, this business is enough to support one person right now at a meager level. So what can the rest of us do to try to like keep things going? But we need to do some other things to take care of our family and personal obligations. And then we were able to work back in. Josh joined the business again. I came back into the business back in 2015, maybe, or something, kind of like right before we launched. We kind of like got to a point.
That makes sense.
And really, these guys built it up over time. We had some things that were working. I was trying to help with business development and drive business into the company, even though I wasn't working there directly. And we got to a point where I could jump back in, and then we were able to really grow from there. But
I'm so glad that you shared, and I'm really thankful that you shared those numbers, because it's helpful, right? When, you know, you're now at the spot where you are right now, I would say highly successful. You've got multiple ventures. You're in a great spot, but it wasn't always like that, right? Like you spent 9 years trying to get this thing to work. And like you said, like right around that pivot point, you guys were in that 500K to $1 million range. And like for everybody who's listening, like that is probably one of the hardest like places to be. You know, I've heard there's a reason why the Entrepreneurs Organization, you know, they say you start at $1 million, but they have like an accelerator program to help you get to that point, because it can be really brutal. And so like, especially if you guys are out there and you're in that spot, right? Like you're in that growth mode. You feel like you're taking 2 steps back and maybe 10 steps backwards, or like
Yeah.
2 steps forward to 10 steps backwards. Like just know that like other incredible entrepreneurs like Zack have been there and they've still persevered. And I think you can too. So I just wanted to put that as an aside.
Yeah. No, that I think that's great perspective. And part of the benefit that I had was having worked in other types of business, like a custom manufacturing cabinet shop for high-end residential cabinets, where you have to be there from 7 to 5:30, and if there's problems with the materials or the finish or the schedule or the drywall doesn't get done, like that is a very complicated business. It has kind of rewards in a way that are different from creating software. But when we got into digital marketing in this space of leveling up our skills and being able to increase our prices and getting clients on retainer and figuring out how to retain them, like that is a kind of business that is easy. Actually, I guess it's easier to scale in some ways, where if it's project based or if it's custom, or it's always these things that, so what we try to encourage people to think about how they can productize their services, how they can streamline their operations, how can you make it scalable in a different way. I think all entrepreneurship is hard,
Yeah.
but there's something about the model that we had at Agurian that, we're building that flywheel. Like, okay, get another customer. Let's keep that customer. Let's get another customer. We've got enough customers. Let's raise the price a little bit. We're going to hire a person, And so I think if someone can hopefully see the trajectory and they can be patient, again, you got to kind of be, I'd say, impatient with actions, but patient with outcomes. Like, what can you do to keep things moving, and just not measure yourself too harshly against, well, how fast is it paying off?
Wow. That right there, impatient with actions, patient with outcomes. That was good. I like that, because that's a great way of framing it.
Thanks.
You got to be just go, get out there and do the thing, but also like recognize like it might not pan out immediately. That is so good. Okay, so you had already alluded to it. You touched on it a little bit, but can you just like share again, as you guys are building, Monkey Island in particular, and things were not always profitable. You didn't necessarily always have enough money to pay everybody, to all the founders, all the owners. How did you guys manage to finance that stage of growth?
There was, like we said, there was some bank debt, there was some lines of credit, there was some initial cash funding from us. We did have some revenues, of course, which is a great way to fund a thing. And we had some investment from friends and family in those earliest days. And then beyond that, it was really just the living lean, keeping expenses low, and working on, generating revenues. And certainly in a service-based business, really what you're selling is your time, so that we didn't have a lot of inventory to buy, or we didn't need to buy capital equipment and things like that. So and then we kind of grew from there, as I mentioned, by saying, all right, this is at a certain level, we can invest some in the other thing, because you're just not going to start out always like making money, especially on some of these hardware or other offerings, like an agency. Like, you can start selling your time right away, but some of these startup ideas that we've pursued, they just take cash from the beginning. And so, yeah, I think we've just collectively known that we want to be able to keep building things. We're not just in business to just take all the money out that we can and spend it on it. Like, this is part of how we're living, is we're trying things, building companies, trying to make a difference, and we're willing to invest. But at the end of the day, at Monkey Island, it's really about building rich lives together. Like, that's our mission. And it's not just about money. It's about our families and our friendship and freedom and the finances and having some fun. And so we try to keep that perspective when we're making decisions. And I think that has really, really been helpful for us as partners.
Yeah. Oh, that's got to be so life-giving when you are experiencing the inevitable valleys, because you're going to have those peaks, but you're also going to have those valleys. And when you're united around that common purpose of, yeah, we're doing this, but like, we're doing this for a bigger picture of how this impacts our life. That's super important. Obviously there's different trains of thought, different schools of thought in terms of what entrepreneurship looks like. Some people are like, I'm just going to grind it out. I'm going to make a crap ton of money and, have $1 billion exit, which is like almost never happens. Let's just be real here. And that's a certain type of person. But what I'm hearing you say, Zack, is you and your co-founders, your partners, you're very aligned to what life needs to look like in order for this to be a successful endeavor. And it doesn't sound like making a ton of money in, your salaries is necessarily what it is that you guys are going for.
Right. It's definitely a balance. That's not the only thing. I guess one thing I would say to people from my experience is also like value your own time and run an honest business and try to think about, like, there are times for sure where you're going to be the last one to get paid. Maybe you don't get paid at all. You're going to need to take less, and that's fine. That's the way ownership works. But if you're kind of consistently, could you hire someone else to do your job for the amount that you're paying yourself? And then are you kidding yourself about how profitable or successful your business is because you're doing things that someone else wouldn't do? And so it's a balancing act, but I would just say we do have that invest for the future, but I also try to keep a level of pressure on the business financially because it helps keep your mind sharp about the decisions that you're making. Because if you're just like, I don't need to get paid, I'll take less than this, whatever. And then, so
that's true.
Just would
it is a tightrope walk.
Advise people to just kind of say, yes, you got to be the one that goes without if that's what needs to happen, but also be mindful that, like, this is your life and this is your family, and advocating to figure out how to run a business that pays yourself and your team compensation that you can feel good about. But it's not just about getting rich at any expense. It's about the experience along the way.
That's good.
Helping people.
It is, and it's a tightrope walk. You got to be careful to not go too far into one or too far onto the other end of the spectrum. So Zach, I do have some Cloudburst specific questions, and this one I didn't prepare you for, so I apologize ahead of time. But I wanted to get your take on it because this is something that I've been having conversations with other software development agencies about, and just curious to get your hot take. When you go to price your custom builds, the custom projects you guys are scoping out, I know that typically the types of clients you're working with are a little bit larger engagements. They're not usually these little things. They're usually like larger builds. So do you find that you usually gravitate towards getting an estimate, a project bid at a fixed bid, or do you gravitate towards an hourly pricing?
We gravitate more towards an hourly pricing and an agile development approach, which can be a challenge. It's all about building trust with your customer, but also being aligned. And to the extent I've found that is as nice in concept as a fixed price sounds, it doesn't tend to lead to alignment because it depends on who's feel like they're taking the risk. And I guess part of my concern from that comes from not getting frustrated when people just say things are expensive so they don't have to really think about it. And like, that's probably $750,000. And that just shuts down, many conversations. And we're in the spirit of like, how can we help people build the thing they want to build? And so how might we have the conversation to explore what are your problem you're trying to solve? How could we solve it? How much of investment might that be? And trust us that we'll work together to prioritize and solve the problem at the scope that's appropriate for your stage and your budget. So a lot of times we'll have an initial engagement that's the smaller, like discovery type where it's fixed. Like, okay, great. Give us a chance to get compensated for some of our time, show you how we would approach this problem, get a better sense of what we're talking about budget-wise. But when it comes right down to it, we would say it's not the best approach to plan 9 months of development in advance. I mean, you have to know what you're talking about, but how do we bite off smaller chunks where we can ship value that we can learn from, that the customer can see return on their investment sooner? And so we tend to go with more of a team/hourly approach where if it takes longer, it takes longer. If it goes faster, it goes faster. It's not just like, please don't ask for one more feature,
right.
or we're just going to try to crank it out as fast as we can and we don't put as much test coverage or something. It's just like, what do we think is the right way to do it, and how do we communicate that value and find customers, clients who are aligned with this kind of creative craftsmanship approach. But those are challenging conversations.
No, it's so good. And I'm glad that you said that, because this is a similar conversation I had with the guest who is the previous episodes. For all of you guys who are listening, go back and listen if you haven't already, the previous episode where we talked with Phil Ledgerwood down in Kansas. Shout out to Phil. Woot woot. But their shop is an exclusively agile shop. They're very, very agile. That's kind of like their calling card. And he said very similar things as to what you said. He said, long term, it actually builds more trust to pursue an hourly based or team based pricing like you guys are doing as well. And the point of contention, you know, because me as accountant coming from corporate America, I remember, all right, like our whole paradigm is waterfall. Like that's just how we operate. That's why we have our 10Qs going out at the same time every single quarter. We have 10Ks, you know, we have a very regimented schedule. So we think like we eat, live, and breathe waterfall. Then when we come in contact with, you know, a software development methodology, we just assume it's
Hmm.
waterfall. But I think what I'm hearing from a lot of developers is like, no, if you want this to be sustainable long term and get the best outcomes for what you're building, don't fix the scope because like nobody really knows the full requirements until you're just about ready to ship it.
Right. And you can, I mean, you can put a lot of energy into negotiating. Oh, that's a change. That wasn't in scope. And it's not fun. Like
That's right.
there needs to be an accountability to the budget and delivering value. And that's very important to the relationship. But all the time that goes into the back and forth and, you know, super managing the scope and everything. Yeah, there's, like you say, it's a bit of an art and a bit of a science,
Right.
but it's important, at least for us. And it sounds like for your other audience members and guests, like if you have a list of 30 pages of requirements and designs that you already want, there are good teams that would be happy to take that for you and tell you how much it's going to cost to do that. They're in that business. We're in a more creative business, I would say, where we're bringing our perspectives, our experience. There's more than one way to put a map on a page, for example. Like, let's talk about what are your goals? What are the options? What are the trade-offs? How important is that relative to some other things do you think you might want? And if we can be a sounding board to help our clients understand what's hard or what's easy, like they don't know. They might say, oh, I want to translate from English to Spanish. That's got to be super complicated. And we might say, well, actually, it doesn't have to be that hard if we follow these parameters and use these
Hmm.
tools. I'm like, amazing, let's do it.
Yeah.
But something else they ask for might seem very simple, but you don't understand the implications to the data structure or the architecture behind it. And so you're like, yeah, I know it doesn't make sense, but it's true that that is a big deal to change that.
Hmm. Yeah. And
So,
and if
yeah,
you're just on a fixed bid, that might be something that's harder to have a conversation about versus when it's more of, you know, maybe even if it's sprint based, where on each sprint you guys are having open dialogue about
yeah,
what's going to be worked on. One thing you had said though, Zach, and I'm curious about is you said there are still some circumstances where a fixed bid or a value based price does make sense. And it sounded like maybe like on an initial engagement or like what, like maybe like a design sprint. When do you guys usually use fixed bid?
right. It is more in that case where it's of a more of that certain understand the general scope of it, where we're doing some technical discovery and user story definition and some wireframes to a certain degree. You know, it just kind of it helps everybody move forward when the client can say, we know it's this amount of an investment, and we know that's kind of what we're working with, and we're not talking about tens of thousands of dollars. So the margin for error isn't as big on either side, whereas all of a sudden you're just like, oh, so this might be 150 to 250. You know, you're talking bigger numbers where those variances are really meaningful. So we like to do it there just because it helps build trust. The other thing would be if you're doing something very similar to something that we've already done, and part of what we need to understand in this first part of the engagement is kind of like what is the profile of the client?
Hmm.
What things do they care about in terms of level of design detail and quality testing? Like if they, you know, there's the continuums of how precisely things can be designed or how thoroughly they can be tested. And all of those things come with the cost. And we just have to understand what's going to be the right level for this project for this client, because that can have a huge impact on the overall budget,
Oh
even if
yeah.
the features work.
Right.
So,
Right. Totally. Totally the case.
I mean, when the features work.
Yeah, and man, I have like a million more ideas. Like as you were talking, I was like, I have a million other things I wanted to ask or wanted to talk about more specifically. But I'm realizing we're coming up here close on time. We also I do want to talk about the shared success agreement. Do you have maybe a few more minutes where we can kind of
Yeah,
unpack that a little
for
bit?
sure.
Because I think it'll be really helpful for our audience to hear. It's such a unique thing. This is actually one of the things I was most excited to talk with you about, Zach. Is you know you guys have created and crafted a way that I think really resonates and reaches your ideal client, which is a non-technical founder trying to start up a tech company. And you guys kind of pioneered this concept of the shared success agreement. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what is this concept and
Yeah,
how has it been playing into your growth strategy?
thanks. Happy to. So A shared success agreement is an agreement that allows a service provider to contribute some portion of their services for a share of future revenue from the client. It's also possible to invest money for a share of future revenue, but I think for a Cloudburst case and for this audience, it's really you come to us and we think it's $100,000 to build your app. We say we'll contribute $25,000 of that cost at a multiple where we could earn back, say, 3x that amount. And we want to get 10% of your revenues until, in this case, we've earned 3x 25. So we've earned $75,000 at 10% of your revenue. So by the time you've achieved $750,000, $750,000, we'll have gotten our 75K back. We're not on your cap table. We don't own a piece of your company, but we've helped you go further with the capital that you have. And we kind of have that skin in the game. And it allows us the opportunity to build future cash flows from service work that we do today and really invest in our clients. Because there are restrictions and tax implications of investing in other people's companies that this agreement manages to get around. So it is an open source agreement. It's at sharedsuccessagreement.org. And we certainly encourage other folks to check it out and use it. I'm sure if you're running a development agency, you've gotten pitched on work for equity in the past.
Wait, no, nobody's ever heard that before. Wait, I had this great idea. You could build it. It only is going to cost $200,000, but I'll give you a healthy stake in the business.
Yeah, exactly. But this is like at least a $2 million idea. So for 10% of my business and you spend a year building it, then I'll try to sell it and we'll see what happens. I haven't seen that really work out very well. That wouldn't be quite the pitch I would make if I were the founder. But this shared success agreement, I think it helps more founders get started because the services, whether it's tech or finance or marketing or sales, people can say, I want to help this succeed and I'll see some upside for myself when it does within defined parameters. And the nice thing about it being tied to revenue as opposed to profit share, something like, as you know, like from revenue, that's a pretty top line number that you don't have too many things going on with what actually hits that. By the time you get further down to P&L, there's a few more things that can happen. Right. And so based on revenue, and also know as the investor, I'm going to get a better return on my investment if I earn that 3x back in 5 years versus 10 years. But really the commitment is you'll keep paying me so long as you have revenue and until you've paid me that much. So it really, the rate of return is variable, but the faster the company gets the revenue goals, the faster everybody gets paid back. And I think that really helps keep people's focus on what makes a strong business.
Right. Well,
revenue growth.
And I love it. I mean, it's even in the name, a shared success agreement. Because yes, on the one hand, they have stake in the game because they want this to do well so they can get it paid. But it's also incumbent on you not to build something that they just have asked for, but something that is going to be marketable, or you're thinking more holistically when you are considering whether or not this is going to be able to go to market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. And I've learned a lot by trying, investing in different folks. And honestly, there's limitations on who can even invest in people. So we would have clients coming to us say, how much will it cost to build so we can go raise money from somebody else to get it built? And we just say, well, hey, can we cut out the middle step here? And how do we help you get further with the cash that you have? And if what you need is what we do, and as us, we are generating, again, future revenues, because otherwise, as a service-based business, our revenues are tied to what did we do this week? What did we do this month? Whereas if we can invest some of our current capacity at a multiple and make good bets, then we are literally supporting our community and sharing in the success and strengthening our business. And it's been really phenomenal when it's worked. We've had a handful that have worked and a handful more that haven't. The biggest challenge is when people just don't get to revenue at all. Not really a surprise, but it surprised me, honestly. I thought there will be some. Thought there's going to be at least some, not none. But it's happened. People are hesitant to ship. Other things happen. They don't find the market right. And it's that would be my bit of advice is if you find opportunities where there's some revenue and you think your contribution will grow that revenue, that makes it even better.
The best
investment.
Fit. Hands down the best fit. Well, Zach, I want to be respectful of your time. I do have more questions, but I think what this just means is I'm just going to have you come back on and ask you more if you don't mind.
Awesome.
But I think what we'll do is we'll pivot real quick. Where can people go to find you? Or if they have questions, they listen to something you said, they're like, wait, I really want to better understand this thing. They want to reach out to you. Where do they go to follow you or reach out?
Yeah. Thanks. So certainly LinkedIn. So Zack Steven, ZackSteven on LinkedIn, as well as that's my X, I guess it's X now to date myself, X URL, FKA Twitter. That's a great spot to connect. Also, please check out the sharedsuccessagreement.org website to learn more about that agreement. You can reach out if you want to have a conversation about that. I would love to. And on the Cloudburst side, it's cloudburststudio.com. We're in Northeast Minneapolis, so if you happen to be local like me and Tony, we can meet up, come to Startup Week. But otherwise, LinkedIn and Twitter are great bets. And would love to hear what you're working on and what you're thinking about, and be happy to come on again or answer follow-up questions from listeners or folks as you have a chance.
That's right.
To hear what they're excited about.
That's awesome. That's awesome. The technical guys for the non-technical founders right here, Cloudburst, SBC, definitely go check them out. Thank you, Zack. I really appreciate you taking some time to come on the show today. Your entrepreneurial journey and lessons have been very eye-opening to me, and I'm sure they have been to our listeners as well. So thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be able to share the things that I've learned to hopefully help other people's paths, and always glad to learn from others too. So thanks for what you're doing and for sharing your talents with the broader audience to help more people make good decisions and follow that entrepreneurial path if that's calling to them.
Absolutely.
That's great. Great work.
Absolutely. And thank you all to our listeners. If you found value in our podcast episode today, please make sure to share it with your friends and subscribe for future episodes. Also, don't forget to leave us a review because it helps other people to find us and hear inspiring stories just like the one we heard today with Zack. And if you are the founder of a software development agency, or you know somebody who is, and you'd like to share something exciting that you're up to with our audience, drop me a line at tony@equip.com. That's ACCQUIP.com.